Hi guys, I'm Dana Al-Hanbali and this is Something to Consider. I cannot tell you how long I've been waiting to sit down and write about this topic. And what I've done is I've split up the conversation into 3 episodes: the mirror, the room, and the architecture. I hope you will find a few things to consider. When I first started the podcast 50 episodes ago, my goal was to humbly begin unpacking my experiences in an attempt to make sense of it. And for my own selfish reasons of wanting to really work on myself, I began engaging in conversations that felt like personal reflections. Things I was considering, questioning, trying to understand. To my surprise, those conversations resonated with a community of people I hadn't met before. It was strange because I had this idea in my head about who my listener was and what they would expect of me. And in the beginning, I played to that version. I positioned towards it. I crafted towards it. But I hadn't actually met you yet. And that was the beginning of my education, not in content creation, but in accountability. Because the moment you stop performing and start revealing, you lose the luxury of hiding behind positioning. As a strategist, I was always comfortable observing culture from the sidelines, analyzing behavior, dissecting systems, looking for patterns. But when you press record and your name sits next to your thoughts, you're no longer studying the arena. You're in it. And the cost of being in the arena is ownership. For a long time, I convinced myself that downplaying my strengths was humility, that not fully embracing what I'm good at would somehow keep me grounded. If you notice, it's actually something that is revered very much in others, and we encourage people to do. What I've learned, though, the hard way, is that shrinking doesn't make you humble. It makes you negotiable. And when you make yourself negotiable, the world will negotiate you. So let's start there. Accountability. I looked it up in the dictionary, which said that it means being answerable, that you must be able to respond for what you say, what you do, or what you fail to do. But I think accountability is simpler than that. It's the willingness to stand in front of the mirror and not look away. Not an aesthetic mirror, a moral one. We're the most self-obsessed generation in history. We document everything. We broadcast everything. We curate versions of ourselves constantly. We measure ourselves in engagement, validation, applause. And yet we are deeply disconnected from seeing what is actually there. We are obsessed with visibility, yet struggle to see ourselves clearly. Terrified of the idea of self-confrontation. We avoid it at all costs. We'll read books that talk about it as this intellectual idea and wear it as a badge of honor. But accountability asks a question that ego does not enjoy. What is my impact? Not my intention, my impact. A few months ago, I wrote a post about the mass exodus from corporate life. Everyone wants to leave. Everyone wants to build their own thing. And I asked, okay, so if everyone's building a company, who's going to be left to build within one? It raised questions I'm still sitting with. Does everyone have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? Why do we romanticize ownership of time when running a business often consumes more of it? Is the issue discipline? Or are we reacting to work systems that have normalized burnout as ambition? My instinct tells me that it's probably layered. Owning a business is not the same thing as working independently. A business is a system that must survive you. A service is an extension of you. Those are very two different promises you're making in the world. Working independently gives you ownership of your time, yes, but it also creates hypervigilance, volatility. You become the subject of the next opportunity, the next invoice, the next client. And then we say the system's broken. And sometimes it is, but sometimes we opted into a different one. Accountability is being able to tell the difference. And this is where privilege quietly enters the conversation. Privilege isn't always wealth. Sometimes it's simply the ability to opt out, to leave when it gets uncomfortable, to disengage when it's inconvenient, to rebrand instead of repair. I'm not condemning it, it's just an observation. Because real accountability asks a much harder question. Who absorbs the cost of my freedom? Someone always does. What happens to the world when we all decide to leave the table? If the system is only as strong as our willingness to sit through the hard conversations, what is left when the room is empty? And the truth is, we're all living in a time where autonomy is celebrated more than responsibility. We talk about empowerment constantly, but empowerment without responsibility is ego. And ego is subtle. It tells leaders they are visionary when they are rigid. And I know this because I've met them. It tells founders they are bold when they are reckless. And I know this because I've worked with them. It tells individuals they are protecting their peace when they're avoiding growth. And I know this because this was me. Accountability disrupts the ego. There's a specific part of Malcolm X's story that I've always found confronting. It isn't the fire in his speeches or the legendary sharpness of his rhetoric. It's the evolution. Malcolm began as a man of absolute certainty. His worldview was a fortress, clean lines, high walls, rigid convictions. And then he traveled to Mecca. He encountered a reality that his fortress couldn't hold. He saw Muslims of every race, every complexion, and every background, praying shoulder to shoulder. Here is where most of us would have blinked. Most of us would have tried to rebrand. We would have quietly adjusted our captions or edited our past to make it look like we'd known the truth all along. But Malcolm didn't pivot in the dark. He publicly admitted that his worldview had been incomplete. He allowed his old self to die so a truer version could be born. That is accountability. Not the performance of perfection, but the courage to evolve in public. Malcolm didn't leave the table when it got uncomfortable. He sat there until the table itself got bigger. He realized that the only thing worse than being wrong is staying wrong just to protect your ego. In a culture that rewards consistency over truth, he chose truth. It's easier to double down. It's harder to say, I have new information. I see differently now. Most people would rather be wrong with their tribe than right by themselves. Malcolm chose to be right alone. Accountability at its highest level is intellectual humility, and humility requires ego to step aside. Now zoom out, because this isn't only personal, it's cultural. They told us not to believe in God, then asked us to follow celebrities, brands, and cult trends. They told us to forget marriage, then created apps for intimacy with no commitment. They told us to wait to have kids, then created a whole industry off storing your eggs. They told us to detach from family, then created social clubs to control how you would opt into community. They told you to stop growing your own food, then sold you fresh imported goods and meals delivered to your doorstep. They told you that longevity was the goal, then sold you products to facilitate living longer. Every convenience they sold comes at a cost they are profiting from. At what point does knowledge become useless if no action is taken? We're aware, informed, exposed, but awareness without action becomes posture. When I initially wrote this part of the script, I was asked multiple times, who is they? And I think part of accountability is answering that question for yourself. And here's where women enter this conversation in a way that's deeply personal to me. There was a prompt that went viral recently, one of those AI experiments where someone asked, how would you disconnect a woman from her fulfillment and purpose? And the answer was chillingly clinical. It said you wouldn't do it violently. You would do it through fragmentation. Convince her that she must choose one version of herself to be valid, career or motherhood, soft or strong, ambitious or nurturing, masculine or feminine. You would tie worth to performance, make rest feel indulgent, make enough feel unattainable. You would confuse empowerment with disconnection, independence without interdependence, strength without softness, power without intimacy with self. You would create constant comparison, algorithms that measure beauty, metrics that measure relevance. You would pathologize intuition, label emotion as irrational. None of this requires hatred. Only disconnection. And accountability requires asking, where am I participating in this conditioning? Where have I measured myself against illusions I claim to reject? Where have I confused independence with isolation? I've talked about this before. The biggest lie ever sold to people is that worth is something you earn. After achievement, after productivity, after validation. If worth is conditional, you will spend your entire life negotiating your existence. You will overwork to feel secure. You will compare instead of connect. You will tolerate misalignment to feel safe. Accountability shifts when you realize you don't have to build worth, you uncover it. And once you know that, your responsibility changes. You stop performing alignment and you start practicing it. And you know what? Maybe accountability isn't about who's right and who's wrong. Maybe it's about who's willing to stay when it would be easier to walk away. Maybe it's about recognizing that privilege is not guilt, it's awareness. And awareness without responsibility becomes complicity. So before we talk about systems, before we talk about the source, we begin here with self. Because if we cannot sit with our own reflection without flinching, we have no business correcting the world. Something to consider.